Welcome to our webinar, The Visitor That Will Not Leave, Anger After Brain Injury. Today's webinar is being presented by Dr. Herman Lukow, and the objectives for the presentation are for our participants to be able to differentiate between two types of anger, to be able to describe why anger is common after brain injury, and to be able to identify and choose strategies used to manage anger, whether they be survivors, caregivers, or service providers. I wanted to let everyone know this project is supported by a grant from the Administration for Community Living, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and a state contract administered by the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. Also, I wanted to let everyone know this presentation is being recorded, so it can be viewed in the future. Everyone's lines are muted. So if you do have a question during the presentation, please type your question in the question box to the right, and we will try to get to those either during the presentation or immediately after. And if we're not able, for some reason, to respond, we will be able to get back to you as soon as possible. If you would like a copy of today's PowerPoint, you can download the PDF also to the right of your screen under Handouts. We do not offer CEUs for the presentation today, but I can provide individuals with a certificate of attendance. Please just indicate that you would like a certificate in the follow-up survey that will be emailed to you once this presentation is complete. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Herman Lukow. He is a retired military officer and aviation professional. He earned a master's degree in marital and family counseling in 2009 and a doctorate in counselor education in 2012 from the College of William and Mary. After receiving his doctorate, Dr. Lukow spent 3 years as a postdoctoral fellow with VCU Neuropsychology and Neuropsychological Rehabilitation, constructing and studying interventions aimed at improving a resilient response to injury for survivors of brain injury and increasing relational satisfaction and functioning in couples stressed by brain injury. He currently practices as a licensed marital and family therapist at Balanced Behavioral Health in Midlothian, Virginia. So thank you, Dr. Lukow, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. This is I'm really honored to be able to give this webinar today. It's a little strange. This is the first time I've used this format. I really enjoy looking in the faces of the folks when I'm speaking at different conferences and presentations. We'll see how this goes. Thank you very much for your interest. So as Deborah said, she asked if I would present this in a webinar format. This is a presentation I gave earlier in the year. I think it was back in March, and got a pretty positive response. So we wanted to get the word out. So let's proceed here and see what we end up with. See if I can figure out these controls. Deborah, do I have control here?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Okay. So these are the purposes. We want to review anger. Just kind of we'll start from general anger, work toward getting more focused on anger after brain injury. And part of that will be, I'll just show you a couple of handouts that we use for the resilience and adjustment intervention that addresses specifically managing anger, and then some tips. It's important to realize that managing anger is a skill. And we'll get into more of the challenges that in managing anger and that injury specifically poses. I just want you to know that anger management, anger is a skill. It just takes some practice. And it can be very, very frustrating. I understand that. These are the, let me get to the objectives here. It's just slowing down a little bit on me when I go to change slides. There we go. These are the objectives that Deborah already told you about, so we'll just move right along from here. So here's anger. just a general slide on anger. You know that anger is a primary emotional response. And it's usually because there's some threat or some perceived wrongdoing, something that's challenging our ego, our sense of self. It could be a threat made by others, or it could just be circumstances that make us feel angry, agitated. And I always, when I'm working with clients, I just talk about 4 basic emotions: mad, sad, glad, and scared. And many people get worried about anger. They just want everything in life to be happy, and we know life's not like that. It's a constant cycle of mad, glad, sad, scared, and after injury, mad, anger, is a very common reaction. So the emotions are not bad by themselves. They're God-given. They serve a very useful function in that they tell us something needs attention. Any of our emotions, something needs attention. However, anger may also be a secondary response. It's triggered by other emotions that people may not understand the underlying emotion, may be uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and so it becomes expressed as anger. This is an example of what I'm talking about, the secondary anger. You notice on the outside all those little faces, fear, frustration, jealousy, hurt. Those are the underlying emotions. And many times folks don't know how to deal or recognize those underlying emotions, and what comes out is anger. I'm really familiar with this. When I first saw this about 10 years ago, I didn't quite understand when people would say, oh, this person's an angry person, you're an angry person, and I never quite understood what it meant. When I saw this little diagram here, it really brought it into focus. So it's really important to realize that anger by itself is not bad, but it'd be better to deal with the emotion that presents rather than let it turn into anger. So here's the difference between anger, aggression, and hostility. A lot of times folks kind of get these confused, and they're used as one, anger or aggression or hostility are all seen the same. But you can see on this slide, they're not. Anger is an emotional response, where aggression is when that anger turns into a behavioral response, throwing things, kicking things, any kind of behavior that starts with the anger can turn into aggression. And then you see the hostility is an attitude. It's kind of a negative attitude that overlies everything. And you see on the bottom there, the expression of anger is uncomfortable, but when we're in a therapeutic climate, many times we want a client to be able to be angry because it could be a very cathartic. It can be a learning experience to pay attention to what that anger is wanting us to focus on. Now, aggression should be clearly communicated, whether it's in a home setting, a provider in a counseling setting, or a group setting. The aggression should never be tolerated. It has to be very clearly communicated. And hostility, if we're running with groups, hostility is really not conductive to a group setting. So that's something that needs to be screened out if you are picking up and perceiving this hostile attitude toward others, toward self, or toward the process. It can just add more anger to a setting that we don't necessarily need. So there's 2 different types of anger. There's reactive anger and instrumental anger. Reactive anger is the anger that most commonly we talk about. Something happens, we react to it. Many times it's caused by fear. There we go. There's one of those underlying emotions that it may morph from fear into anger, right? Usually a result of frustration as well. When I say frustration, I'm sure each one of you out there, whether you're an educator, a caregiver, a provider, survivor, I'm sure each one of you are very familiar with that frustration. It's also reactive. It's caused by something, and then the reaction, it's triggered, comes out as anger. It's usually followed by a sense of guilt and remorse. The person that gets angry understands that what they did might have damaged a relationship, understands that they may have hurt someone or scared someone through their anger. So there's guilt and there's remorse. The instrumental anger is what we're really concerned about. It's a more damaging type of anger. It's when someone has decided that the only way they can get things done in life is by being angry. And it's marked by, you can see of the list, it's marked by intimidation, manipulation. It's proactive, so it doesn't wait for something to trigger it. The person that has instrumental anger uses that anger for a purpose. And one of the big things, a big way to determine between the two is whether there's a sense of guilt or remorse. Now, sometimes someone may, want to debate whether they are angry or the causes of the anger. And that may be many times because they're embarrassed that they lost their mind or they just completely flew off the handle. So it's important to realize that even though someone may want to be making, a kind of blaming or pointing another direction why they got angry, the guilt and remorse may still be there. All right, let's move along here. Post-traumatic anger. Now, it depends on a lot of different aspects of how that anger will come out, how regulated it is. And so part of being able to sort of predict and understand and frame injury after an injury is looking at the person's pre-injury personality. As we all know, personality can really change after an injury. Someone who's very happy-go-lucky all of a sudden becomes, very, very depressed or sad, or someone who used to be very angry all of a sudden it seems like they have no anger, or vice versa. Someone who used to be nice and calm seems to be always agitated. So the pre-injury personality has something to do with that, for sure. And then, of course, depending on where the injury occurs, that's going to affect the ability for someone to regulate their emotions, right? To be able to recognize that what they're feeling is maybe frustration or fear or guilt, but being able to recognize that and then regulate the emotion rather than let it just morph right into anger. And of course, impulse control. So those are all areas in the frontal lobes that damage in those areas can affect regulation and impulse control. And then, of course, we have cognitive impairments. For example, issues with communication and other abilities when one's not able to communicate necessarily clearly, or they're not feeling understood, or people are just discounting what they have to say. There comes the frustration, can add sadness, can add hopelessness, can result in anger. And the same thing with social cues and skills. There's a lot of times people, they compare themselves. This is very common. People compare themselves today, their current functioning today, against their functioning the day before the injury. And man, the losses are really evident when we compare our current functioning today to how we were the day before injury. And folks will say, well, I never needed to use lists before. I don't need to use lists now. I'm not going to do it. I used to be able to multitask then. I'm going to multitask now. I used to be able to solve problems without any help, and by golly, I'm not going to ask for help now. And that's what I'm talking about, those social cues and skills. It links to the pre-injury personality. The folks keep focused on getting back to where they were before the injury, and we know that that's not possible. Not all the time. Some of the impairments gradually fade, and some never quite clear. So it's a more important yardstick if folks can compare their current functioning against the day they got home from the hospital or the day after their accident. much easier to see the gains, much easier to realize that there are some changes to social skills and skill sets that might need some compensation. Here's some factoids, just a couple of things here. Oops, I went too far. So we in the literature, we know that anger is present or worse up to 33 to 75% of people for survivors. That anger, it's routinely linked with problems with relationships and people becoming socially isolated. An angry survivor is negotiating recovery. That anger really adds to the caregiver burden. It can lead to poor community integration and a poor quality of life. People don't usually like to be around angry people. Caregivers report that anger is to be the most difficult challenge. The anger, there are times where the anger morphs into aggression. About a third of caregivers report that as an issue. But far more damaging is living in a constant turmoil of anger. And you see that bottom box. After traumatic brain injury, cognitive behavioral therapy is often paired with executive functioning training. Those are things like problem solving and goal setting, managing emotions, managing stress, those executive sequencing actions, those kind of things. Those skills can be learned, and they can be teamed with an approach that looks at thinking, the thoughts that come into one's head and take control and send us off in the wrong direction. Relaxation strategies as well, really important. Many times folks, they let the anger get away. Where just a few seconds or minutes of some relaxation training can really help. That's a couple of factoids there. So, triggering anger, you see these three different categories. These are three categories of trigger angers. Anger triggers. I think probably all of these, you folks out there, I would guess, all have experience with this. But we can see when the brain is really being challenged by a lot of inputs, the high noise, a lot of activity, unexpected changes, and maybe a very loose structure where there's little predictability. It can really stress someone when they have reduced capability to control those emotions and to control impulses and to limit the amount of inputs that come in to the brain and cause distress. So it's a big one situation. Personal, when we start talking about pre-injury personality, it can really impact on that. Sometimes the people that have the hardest times dealing with their injury are those people that were in high functioning professional positions where they worked very hard to attain a position, something that gives meaning, definition to their life, and then it's gone in the blink of an eye. So some personal factors you see are the fear, the guilt, the shame, being embarrassed, not being able to remember things, losing that role of being in an organization and contributions making there, losing the role as a father or as a provider, as a mother, sister. The scars can be very embarrassing. And then difficulties with communication. I hear all the time from clients talking about how they couldn't get the right word, or they're trying to explain something in the conversation, add a comment, people looked at them quizzically, and so the survivor, rather than try to work through it, just leaves the situation. And we also have medical issues. pain, the fatigue. Side effects from medications can impact us. Insurance, trying to deal with insurance, that can just load us up with frustration and agitation. And the same thing with providers. There are folks going to providers that don't quite understand brain injury and the challenges, keep insisting that the person doesn't want to change, as opposed to realizing the person can change. I'm sure you could all add some things to each of these three categories. There's some more. They're just general. They're not necessarily categorized, but there's a lot of loss after brain injury. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There's a lot of loss after brain injury. A loss of role, a loss of significance, a loss of meaning, a loss of independence, a loss of self-confidence. So a lot of loss and grief. There's kind of an underlying rumble of grief many times that people are trying to experience and deal with while they're trying to move forward. Poor interpersonal communications, we talked about that a little bit, how the communication can get in the way. Someone feels different, so they don't engage. Or when they do engage, the anger gets out of control, or the agitation turns into an anger. I've heard many times people, the sense of injustice, they were just minding their own business, conducting their life, going about their business, and someone out of the blue might have hit them in a motor vehicle or at work, having a fall or something fall on them. It just doesn't seem fair. A lot of frustration accompanies the injury. We talked about some of that, with insurance companies and providers, and people that just don't understand, employers, physicians that are telling folks, no, you're not ready to go back to work yet. You need to take it easy a little longer. And of course, that leads to issues with money. For a lot of people, money's a huge trigger. When a survivor can't work any longer, and maybe a loved one, a spouse, partner, child becomes a caregiver, and then they themselves end up not working, and so the money takes a hit. You see these others: feelings of failure, assault on the ego and identity is a huge one. And the effects of drugs, and I'm not talking about illicit drugs. I'm talking about regularly prescribed medications. Some of those side effects can be even less emotional regulation, even less impulse control. And you see down there, so these triggers, when combined with compromised inhibition, may lead to more of an impulsive anger and some inappropriate behaviors. It leads to just an impulsive response that's anger. Now, that's not necessarily instrumental anger, right? Because again, someone who may just be impulsive, they don't give it 2 seconds to think before they respond. They're just unable to do that. Don't have that skill set yet. They feel remorse and guilt many times. So it's not like they're being angry to get what they want, to manipulate people. It's still reactive, right? That's the big difference again between that reactive anger and instrumental anger. Here's some warning signs. Now, one of the most important things about managing anger and dealing with anger, whether you're a caregiver, survivor, provider, is maintaining visibility of where your anger's at, knowing what the warning signs are, and taking your emotional temperature quite frequently through the day so that you're able to identify where the frustration's coming from. Where's the agitation coming from? Why is this making me angry? So we really have to be in touch with that. Here's some warning signs. I mean, we've got physical reactions. I know when I get very angry, I can feel the blood. It feels like it's draining out of my face. My mouth gets real dry. Sometimes people will report their hands hurting from them balling their fists or their fingernails digging into their palms. So there's a number of physical reactions: increased heartbeat, overreacting to little things, flying off the handle, being very impatient. That's a sign. Blaming's one that really takes a little bit of takes a little skill, I guess, in looking at, is it part of personality, or is it someone? Most of the time people start blaming when they're just completely overwhelmed, that they're just unable to get what they're trying to get. They didn't get what they wanted to get. They've been trying, but they're completely at the end of their coping, and there's really nothing left to do but kind of lash out and blame others. You know that doesn't help. Cursing and criticizing people, that's a real recognizable one. I know with my kids, they knew that was the first thing. When Dad came home and he cursed, well, they would head for the hills because they knew it was not going to be a good day. That something had happened throughout my work day that just was piling up on me, and I was losing it. And then that isolating or ignoring people, rather than dealing with the anger, rather than trying to get to the bottom of it, rather than realizing that they're agitated because the first appointment they went to, they were kept an hour later before they got seen. They're getting stuck in traffic, or getting lost trying to go somewhere, even with the GPS, and then having people be rude or short with them when they're in the store, and trying to, being impatient. All that can pile up. So we have to maintain an awareness of our anger. We have to take our emotional temperature. This is for everybody, but it's especially important when we're dealing with brain injury. We have to keep that emotional temperature, that anger temperature. So, Barbara, Deborah, before we launch into the next section, where I'm going to kind of talk about different strategies, does it seem like we have any questions that I can address at this point?
We do not have any questions thus far.
Okay, all right, folks, well, let's keep on going here then. We talk about the warning signs for survivors. Here we go. Take that emotional temperature off, and the thing is that for survivors, if you're living with someone, it's real important that you're able to talk to them as well and have a conversation and say, hey, how do you know when I'm getting ready to lose it? What do you see in me? What changes do you see? Because in addition to us being familiar with our own signals of anger, we can enlist other people to help us. We can go to people and say, look, I'm really trying to work on my anger. I'm really trying to recognize it and deal with it constructively. Would you help me by giving me the sign, whatever that sign might be? Might be a code word, code red, DEFCON 5 or something like that. But, let me know what you see. That would help me. Okay, so learning to relax and ground oneself. That's where relaxation techniques come in. So many times when I'm dealing with folks, we'll talk about, how did everything go since the last session? And I'll say, I still got angry, and a couple times got into a few arguments and fights. And so what were they about? Folks normally don't remember. And I'll tell you what, that's not just for people that are brain injured. I all the time have couples. I see a lot of couples, and they will report, oh yeah, we just fight. Everything's anger, but they can't tell me what it was about. Some of the smallest little things people take and create into a major event. So being able to relax a little bit, being able to recognize, wait a minute, I know what this feeling is. I'm starting to get agitated. Let me take a couple breaths and look at what's really behind it and what I can do. Now, sometimes about all you might be able to do is to try to distract oneself when there's a thought that gets stuck in the head and it's causing agitation. Maybe it's causing a lot of fear, and that fear then turns into, I don't know, maybe someone's afraid that they're never going to get back to work ever again. And that thought just sticks in their head, and from there they're bankrupt, and from there they're looking out that, oh my God, I'll be living on the street and my kids won't love me and it'll be terrible. Well, that's the time to start trying to distract. All right? Look for activities, anything that'll bring some enjoyment. You could look at some kitten videos on the internet to break that. You could look at your children sleeping. Look at a beautiful sunrise or sunset, or in your own head, just close your eyes and breathe deeply and go to a place that will just allow you to calm down. Now, self-imposed stresses. Managing stress and managing anger, they're much the same. I mean, when we're stressed, we're quicker to anger usually because we don't have as much emotional regulation. And when we're angry, we get more stressed. So it's like this vicious cycle. So there's some things we can do about stress, and there's some things we can't do about it. But when we look at these self-imposed stresses, I use the acronym of DEAF. Self-imposed stresses, these are things we have control over. Drugs, whether they be prescribed or over-the-counter drugs, there's side effects. Exhaustion, pushing too hard. I would tend to agree. If I was looking at you in the audience, I would see some head shaking, nodding, because being tired, the battery running out, this sudden loss of energy is very common after a brain injury. It's like we can go, and then all of a sudden hit the wall. The battery runs down to zero. So we have to be careful that we don't exhaust ourselves and push too hard too soon. Alcohol, it's a depressant. There's a rebound effect, same tobacco. And then finally, hypoglycemia, that's our diet. We have to keep our diet in balance. We've got to make sure we're eating the right foods, we're eating regularly. I think we've all seen some of the commercials on TV with Betty White, these guys that are hangry, hungry, angry, and they grab a Snickers bar and all is well. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that. So delaying those initial impulses is really important. Realizing that sometimes the first thought comes to our mind is leading us down the wrong path, and it may not even be true. A couple people talking over the corner, glancing our way, and then laughing. Well, one person could turn that into a negative event, thinking that someone's talking bad about me. They're making fun of me. They know that I've got a brain injury. They know that I have a hard time talking. They're putting me down. That's not necessarily true. So just being able to delay an initial input and look for other reasons that those people might be talking and laughing, I don't have anything at all to do with you. It's important for us to dispute those first thoughts, especially when that first thought immediately activates us and puts us in like an agitated, angry state. Take a couple seconds, take a couple breaths, and look at it a different way. Learn to take those timeouts and give others an opportunity to call timeout. It's really important because when we get to a certain point, we call it emotional flooding. When we get to a certain point, our emotion gets high enough, there is no rational thought, and we're reacting strictly on emotion. And when we do that, we can say and do some things that are rotten. That's important. Sometimes you may just need to call a timeout, and you need to let the people around you know that that sometimes you will be calling a timeout because you just need to get away. But even more important to that, that you let them know that you'll be back, that you'll continue the conversation, that you just need a little break. You need to find your quiet place for 10 minutes, recharge your battery, and then you'll be back, all right? So some tools that are there to reduce your frustration. You can set SMART goals. SMART, that means a goal that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. There's nothing worse than being given a goal that we're not quite sure what's being asked for. Adds to that frustration, adds to anger, may just throw up our hands and give up. We don't want that. Brain books, agendas, calendars, all those things are great. And practicing problem solving goes a long way as well. You can also prepare for difficult encounters using like an if-then sort of scenario. For example, if you know your Aunt Judy is always, when you see her at any kind of event, and she's always doubting that you're actually injured, thinking that somehow you're getting over and just trying to get disability or something, and every single time you know that she's going to ask those questions, and every single time it leads to an argument. Well, if you do a little preparation ahead of time, you might come up with a little scenario where you think, if Aunt Sally comes up and starts her same old thing, then I will politely dismiss myself and go to my quiet spot. Or I will go to my spouse, my caregiver, my mother, whoever it might be, and ask for their advocacy. We talked about that new yardstick. We compare ourselves to the day before injury, is going to be a loser every time. If we can compare ourselves to the day after injury, most of the time we're going to be a winner. We can see the change. When you're looking at controlling your anger, remember, it's not just going to clear up overnight all by itself. It takes specific action and some concentration. All right, so it's a process. You have to give yourself a break. Caregivers, a couple things to think about. Prevention-wise, we want to make sure that we provide a safe, stimulating environment for our loved ones that are trying to recover from brain injury. We've got to have adequate supervision so that they're going to stay safe, so that we can help folks identify those triggers or activities that might be causing frustration, agitation, and anger, so that someone doesn't just feel as though they're sitting in a room and have nothing to do during the day except think about all the loss that's happened. So that's when we start talking about reorientation for the caregivers, is recognizing that it's coming out as anger, but there's other causes. It's a secondary. There's other emotions that may be causing that. Now, during an encounter where there's our angry loved one, an angry survivor, one way to deal with that is to withdraw from the conflict, to refuse to try to dispute, to refuse to try to change the person's mind, and just withdraw from the conflict. You can't have a tug of war unless two people are pulling on the rope, right? So withdrawing is not a bad option. Distracting, asking someone, helping them find some way to distract, pulling up those kitty videos on the YouTube, or asking if they would like to take a walk. Maybe they need a little something to eat. Maybe they would like to help plan something or accomplish a task. Reorienting, reassuring is a big one. Just reorient the person to the challenge at hand and reassure that all is going to be all right. We're in a process. And engaging in that collaborative problem solving, when we can identify the problem, what's not going right, what's not going fast enough, then we can join with our survivors and then we can work around that. Actually solve the problem before the frustration and anger sink in. is what I mean about this. Oops. This is what I mean about the collaborative problem solving. It's like a 4-step process. And first, it's just expressing the understanding of the emotion. When someone comes to us and they may be all emotional and angry, it helps to be able to say, you're angry. I understand you're angry. I'm guessing that you're very frustrated because all of our appointments this morning were late. I guess you're feeling very stressed out because we've had a very busy schedule today. We can understand that emotion. We don't try to change the emotion. We don't say, oh, you shouldn't be angry. It's just, you've got to learn not to be angry. No, we don't want to change the person's mind. We want to acknowledge it, express an understanding. And we can express empathy without necessarily condoning it. We can say, I understand that you're angry. It seems like you're probably frustrated from our schedule today. I know I get really frustrated too when I make doctor's appointments. I had to wait 45 minutes the other day at my dermatologist. I can understand that. But then we move to state the problem, and we can say, here's the problem though. When you don't deal with the cause of anger, when you get angry, you scare people. The people at the front desk don't want to help you. And my problem is that it adds stress to my life, and I'm trying to help you. So the problem is stated, and then we can go right into the enlisting the help. Hey, let's sit down, the two of us, and look at what the solution might be. Brainstorming, just coming up with any kinds of different things that might work. And then we focus on a couple of the ideas, make them shared. It's not one person forcing the other into action. It's both people working together collaboratively, and then supporting whatever the problem solving is using those SMART goals again. So for example, if we're talking about someone who's getting really agitated and angry because it was such a busy schedule at the doctor's appointments and it seemed like everyone was always behind their schedule, by brainstorming, we might realize the best thing to do is we just want to schedule one appointment each morning, no more than one appointment in the morning, and more than one appointment in the afternoons. And we can turn that into a goal. My goal is to not schedule more than one doctor's appointment before noon and not to schedule more than one appointment after noon. Or it may be that you don't schedule appointments any closer without a 2-hour break between them. But that's how you come to a collaborative solution, by just brainstorming those issues and then sharing responsibility for the solution. So caregivers, providers, when dealing with folks that are angry, if that's, it can be very draining. It's important you take care of yourself. You got to have exercise and sleep. There's certain situations that are going to be difficult. You can plan ahead. And lots of times in difficult situations, the solution actually may become a problem because we keep trying the same solution over and over and it doesn't work. So sometimes in those difficult situations, we need to look at, where is my solution actually becoming a problem? Maybe I need to change the solution. Use active listening. Understand what the person is saying. Listen to understand versus listening to rebut. And it's a sad thing sometimes when I see caregivers and survivors together and the caregiver just talks about just feeling so hopeless and unloved. And the caregiver will rebut right away. How can you say you're unloved? We all love you. You're surrounded by love. You just don't appreciate it. You can't see it. That's only going to deepen the sense of not being understood. That's only going to deepen the sense of people don't hear me. It just deepens the frustration. So active listening, joining with the person, understanding what they're saying, honoring that, not trying to change their mind. Not initially, at least. That's where employing those problem-solving, collaborative problem-solving comes in. You can express your anger in non-threatening ways so it doesn't trigger more. Dispute your automatic thoughts. Sometimes it's very easy to think this will never get better. Life is going to be like this the rest of my life. It's going to be miserable. That's not true. Humor does a great deal to diffuse tense situations, and then breathing it away. Deep diaphragmatic breathing to ground, to stay present, to not give events from the past power over our present, to not imagine things in the future and give them power over our present. That's really important. A lot of different ways you can learn to breathe. If you're in, I know with the clients that I see, that's one of the very first things we deal with is learning to breathe, diaphragmatic breathing. And if you're involved in yoga, usually it's some instruction on breathing there as well. And a lot of different rehab professionals, physical therapists, occupational therapists, they can provide instruction on that as well. Here's some typical interventions that are used for dealing with anger. It can be group or individual. Anger management, when folks get sent to, quote unquote, sent to anger management, it's usually in a group setting. Of course, if you're having issues with anger, you can get individual counseling as well. Cognitive behavioral therapy, what cognitive behavioral therapy is all about is recognizing that our thoughts control our behaviors and our feelings. And therefore, if we always give power to negative thought, we'll always have the negative mood and behavior to accompany it. If we're able to dispute it and change it to something that's just as likely but not as upsetting, we can control our anger that way. We talked about relaxation training, psychoeducation on causes and remedies, kind of like what this little briefing, this little presentation is all about. Helps many times to highlight the challenges, provide some suggestions, maybe infuse a little hope that this anger can be managed. See the skill building for goal setting and problem solving. And when conducting group sessions, brain injury support groups, other group settings where anger is not necessarily the focus, it's good to make sure that recurring session on anger is sort of incorporated into the group process so everybody understands what's going to happen when a group member gets angry and the group has to deal with it. All right? We don't want to wait till it happens. We want to be prepared for it. And we want to make sure that we're educating everyone in the group on that process. Again, anger can be, which is strange, but it can be a positive emotion because it can allow us to be more assertive and stand up for ourselves and help us express tension to burn off tension. It can help energize us, make us feel in control, spur us into action. But if it's too much anger, when it leads to aggression, when it starts getting in the way of your relationships, the way you love, the way you play, the way you work, then anger's a problem. And when it dictates the way we feel all the time, it's time to address it. Again, we don't want to necessarily get rid of anger. It's a given emotion. We want to ensure that when anger is expressed, the response is appropriate, and then it just isn't allowed to take on a life of its own. Here's a copy of some of the handouts that we use for resilience and adjustment intervention. This was put together by VCU Neuropsychology, Jeff Kreutzer, Nancy Sue, Anna Mills, and that gang. And you'll see the first thing we talk about is basic facts about anger. Now, this is a session that's used with survivors, a therapist one-on-one with a survivor. So it's kind of that educational piece that we talked about. Some basic facts about anger. we move into what are the early signs of anger for you? I ask when I'm dealing with folks, which do you feel? And then I always ask, what would other people say as well? So we get some facts, a little bit of education about anger. Then we move into the early signs so we can do something about it. And then we talk about some tips. And on here are a lot of those tips that I just talked about earlier, right? Realizing that you're in charge of yourself. Recognizing where your thoughts are leading you down the wrong road, the wrong direction. Talking to people that you love and trust. Considering leaving the situation. Finding other ways to deal with anger, whether it be physical exercise, distraction. So that's just a little example of how very simply, in a series of 4 different handouts, that's provides a rich environment for discussing anger, what it is, the early signs, and how to cope. So the number one concern with managing anger is safety, right? So this kind of talking to, again, group leaders. At one point, I was asked to make a presentation for potential group leaders. And I pulled this slide from that briefing because I thought it was valuable in this setting. I'm not sure how many folks out there might be group leaders or thinking about being group leaders, but these are some things about managing anger in the group. Staying calm and that active listening. Allow for venting, realizing that venting is going to happen. That's a way to relieve tension. Not arguing with it, can't win, can only make it worse by arguing against the anger. It's about dropping the rope. It takes 2 to have a tug of war. It takes 2 to have a power struggle, right? So we can just drop the rope. Acknowledge and validate that anger, as I was saying before. Express that understanding of what's going on. Empathize with a personal example, potentially, without necessarily condoning what happened. The 2 big ones, one is removing the stimulus. When in a group, it may be just too much activity. There may be too much light. It may be too cold. The sunlight might be glaring in, or certain pattern of the blinds on the wall may activate someone. So that's really important to look at what stimuli may be out there that are provoking anger. And the same thing with changing the subject or a topic. If we're going off topic, if someone's taking the group to a certain direction that's not good, that's up to us to redirect that. In the midst of that angry member, or it could be a number of group members, it kind of grows sometimes, the anger in groups. We want to make sure that we maybe slow things down a little bit, and if need be, exercise our timeout authority as the group leader to say, look, folks, we're taking a break. This is what timeout means. You can see that we can offer other alternatives. This one, sometimes it's a good idea to have co-leaders, co-group leaders. If it's disruptive enough, you may want to speak to the group member after the session to kind of set the barrier, the boundary, the expectations, the requirements for being in the group. And in severe cases, we may just have to ban someone from a group, protect the rest of the people of the group from the anger, from the disruption. Again, anger, especially in a group setting, can be contagious. It can lead us down the wrong path. So I'm going to try to get through these references right here. These are some nice little references. I got to tell you that Brain Injury Association of Virginia, Brainline, Brain Injury Association of America, they all have excellent articles and references on dealing with anger. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those. So that concludes my little presentation on anger here. We'll leave this about 5 minutes. What kind of questions do we have out there?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Lukow. We don't have any questions now, but I want to give, like you said, we got a few minutes. If somebody has a question and they want to type it in or comment or need additional information, we're happy to respond to those requests. We're going to hold on for a couple minutes and see if anybody has anything to
Sure.
add or questions, and then.
Now, this anger it's very common. I'm sure everybody out there knows. It's a common emotion after injury. So much frustration, so many changes, the confusing and huge nature of the changes. It's quite a challenge, I know.
Well, thank you so much. I didn't have any questions, but if you do have a question, or if you have an opportunity where you review this information and you have questions that come up, please just let me know, and I can funnel them to Dr. Lukow, and he can hopefully get back with us. Oh, I have one coming in.
Okay, good.
Somebody was asking about getting to get the PDF, and if you're not able to download it, it's under handouts. So to the right of your screen, there should be a little tab that says handouts, and you can download that PDF right now, so you can have it. But if for some reason you're not able to do that, I can send it later. It's not a problem. Does anybody else have any questions? Just to remind everybody, an automatic survey will come to your email at the conclusion, and there, if you would please just give us some feedback. And also, there's a place for you to indicate that you would like to receive a certificate of attendance, and I will get that to you this week. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Lukow, for your wonderful presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
And everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you helping me with my first webinar. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Dr. Lukow?
Yes, ma'am.